In this lesson, we'll have a look at end particles and we'll learn how to emit them from an object. In this scene, we have the final animated sequence we worked on in the previous section. And what we'll do is add particles to enhance our scene. So as the door opens, we can have particles emit, and we'll have them look like steam is rolling out of this opening. So let's say we go ahead and get to it. We will move over to our perspective view. Now, the reason why we'll have our particles emit from an object is to create the illusion of them being emitted out of this hole. We don't want to fill our hole here with particles and have them roll out that way, because that would take a lot of time for Maya to compute. So instead we should think about ways to cut down time, but still get the results we want. Let's say we go ahead and create a polygonal cylinder. You can see it's rather small. That's because our mech is actually huge. So I'll just go ahead and bring up the size of this cylinder so that it's about the size of the hole that we will emit from. Alright, sweet. And then we can kind of center it, maybe pulling it forward just a bit more. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think that this will work out well. Let's go to our cylinder's settings. Let's go ahead and set the subdivision caps to 0. Fantastic, because we'll be removing the upper and lower cap on this. They're not needed. All we need are the sides of this object. And speaking of the sides, we want to make sure that our subdivision amount is pretty high. That way our particles will bunch up as they start to emit out from the normals of this object. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and have a look. We'll go ahead and bring up our cylinder, and we'll also go ahead and scale it down. Let's go ahead and bring it down in the y-axis. So this size should work out well. Now, we'll then go to Display, Polygons, and choose Face Normals. Sweet. Right now the normals are kind of small. Let's go ahead and go back to Display, Polygons, and we'll choose Normal Size. Let's go ahead and increase this to about 10. Wonderful. Alright, so here you can see the direction that our normals face, and this is the same direction our particles will emit from. If any of these are flipped, just go ahead and right click and go to Face Mode, select the face, hold down the spacebar to access your hotbox, go to Normals, and then choose Reverse. Alright, fantastic. So this looks good. What I'd like to do is go ahead and remove the upper and lower faces. Fantastic. Now, let's go ahead and go to vertex mode. We'll go ahead and grab our upper vertices, and we'll go ahead and scale them in a bit. Remember, our particles will emit in the direction of our normals, right? So we want them to kind of shoot up first, and then we'll use a parameter to pull them back down. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and press F8 to go back to object mode. We'll now go ahead and bring this down so it's just inside of the hole here. Alright, that should work out well. We'll now go ahead and freeze our transforms. We're not going to scale this up to match the size of this opening, simply because we'll be using this floor as a collision object, meaning our particles will fall along this floor. And if this gets too close to our collision object, Maya won't know what to do with our particles and they'll fly off in 3D space. Unless you want that type of effect, let's go ahead and make sure that our object is scaled in just a bit more. You can see when I froze transforms, it did not freeze all channels, so I'll just go ahead and go back to the options and check rotation and scale, or you can just go to edit and choose reset and then freeze. And this is to be on the safe side. We want to make sure that our objects are as clean as possible before we begin our simulations, because we don't want any accidental crashes or anything like that. And for that reason, I'll go ahead and delete history on this object. I'll go to Edit, Delete by Type History to clean up all of those unwanted nodes. Let's go ahead and name this object geo_emitter. Fantastic. And now it's time to emit particles from this. Let's go ahead and use End Dynamics this time. It's a much more robust system, a much faster system than Maya's normal dynamics module. And that's why End Dynamics was introduced to be an improvement to Maya's dynamic system. All right, fantastic. So how do we emit particles from this object? Well, with it selected, we can go to End Particles, Create End Particles. First, let's have a look at the particle type we will emit. Let's go ahead and work with Thick Cloud. By the way, if you'd like to learn more about these settings, feel free to take a look at Introduction to nDynamics. Well, we'll work with Thick Cloud because we're trying to create steam, right? And then we would like to emit from an object. Well, let's go ahead and go to our option box here, and we will reset the settings. Now, our emitter type is set to Omni. We don't want to use this because we will emit from our vertices. So instead, let's go ahead and switch to Surface. Fantastic. We could also adjust a few other properties, but we'll have a look at those properties in our attribute editor. So this is good for the time being. Let's go ahead and choose Create. Now let's have a look at our outliner to see what Maya has added to our scene. So you can see we have our particle object and then the nucleus node. This is the heart of the nDynamics system. So whenever we would like to have our particles influenced by gravity, or perhaps we need to set the right scale in our scene to make sure that they fall at the right speed, well, this is done from our nucleus node. And then we have an emitter as well. If we were to expand the GeoEmitter object, you can see the emitter has been actually parented to the object. Whereas if we were to go back and just create an emitter, this would be outside of this hierarchy. It would be standalone. All right, fantastic. But this is great because whenever we need to move our surface, the emitter will follow. Nice. Now, if we were to hit play, if I were to start back from the beginning and start playing through the sequence, we won't really see anything just yet. We have a few other properties to modify. If we were to go to our end particle object, we can then go ahead and press Control-A to jump to our attribute editor. We can increase the radius of our particle object. So, again, underneath particle size, we can start to bring up the size here. Now we can start to see our particles. So we start to hit play. You can see they start to build up, but this doesn't look too convincing just yet. Let's go ahead and modify, let's say, one more parameter. We'll go to the emitter, and we'll go ahead and find our speed parameter. Let's go ahead and increase this a little bit more. Let's say to about a value of about 150. Let's go ahead and bring it up even more than it was before. And now you can start to see particles emitting from this object, which is super cool. But this still isn't what we necessarily want. So we'll go ahead and stop the lesson here. And in the next lesson, we'll go ahead and start to adjust our properties to get something that looks a bit more natural.